Hello, people. Assalamu alaikum. This is Mubaraka from Fit Muslima, obviously, because you are on the Fit Muslima fan page, right? Okay. So this afternoon, or I should say this afternoon, it's 12:30, isn't it? Yes, it is. So this afternoon, what we're doing is we are talking a little bit about why health is wealth, but wealth is also health. And that is super important. And please engage me in discussion. Make sure that you comment below. I have a little bit of time, maybe about 30 minutes or so, that we're going to talk about this. And then we'll go into some questions and answers and discussion. And so one of the things that I thought would be interesting to have a little bit of chat about is the idea that wealth is, in fact, health. So I know I have people who log on from all around the world, so it's really true no matter where we are. What you have access to in terms of improving your health really depends on your financial stability. It depends on the resources that are available to you. I live in a city where we have lots of resources available, but they're not available to everybody. So that's one of the reasons why I started my nonprofit organization. And so here are some of the interesting things. So people often wonder why people in lower income neighborhoods have worse health outcomes. And when we talk about worse health outcomes, when we look at the statistics and we look at things like diabetes and high blood pressure, and we look at heart disease and we look at cancer, across the board, no matter what state in the United States that you're in, no matter what country that you're in, generally for most countries, if you are low income, if you are impoverished, then all of those numbers go up. There's a greater propensity for diabetes, a greater propensity for high blood pressure, a greater propensity for cancers. So all of these go up the poorer you are. So that reduces your life expectancy. You know, I was just reading some information about Louisiana, and it was saying that the life expectancy of a child born in Louisiana can literally differ 25 years within a 10-mile radius. Like, that's crazy that one person will live to be 75 and someone else will only live to be 50 because of where they're born. And why is where you're born matters? It matters because your environment really has a huge impact on how your health will turn out. So there's a really interesting, so if you are one of those researcher people and you like to follow up and find out your own information, I'm going to throw some terms out. So you want to have a pen and a piece of paper or be Googling something. So there's a term that's called epigenetics, right? So what epigenetics is, it is when we have a certain propensity in our DNA. So for example, I have a huge propensity for diabetes in my family. It runs very strongly in my family on my mother's side. I also have a huge inherited risk of high blood pressure. Literally, I did my ancestry. I had my DNA done to find out literally where my DNA comes from, and I did some research on Ancestry.com, and it was really, really eye-opening and fascinating on several different levels. I found lots of stuff out about my family that I didn't know before, but one of the things that surprised me the most was that every death certificate that I found, and on Ancestry.com, I mean, I'm not being paid to plug Ancestry.com, but it's a great resource. On Ancestry.com, you can actually see, they have scanned thousands and thousands of documents, so you can actually read the death certificate for family members. And one of the things that I found is every single death certificate that I found, with the exception of one person, died from either a stroke or an aneurysm. Both are results of high blood pressure. My father died when he was 55 from a stroke induced by high blood pressure. We don't think he even knew he had high blood pressure. My grandmother, his mother, died from an aneurysm. His sister died from an aneurysm. So this is a family trait, all having high blood pressure. But what epigenetics tell us is that we have these genes that can either be turned on or turned off based on our environment, based on our lifestyle choices, and based on what we are exposed to. So I don't look at it as if I am doomed to get diabetes or I'm doomed to get high blood pressure. I may have to work a little harder than someone who does not have this that runs in their family, but it's certainly not, we're not doomed. So here's an example. For the guys out there, right? So we know now through epigenetics that people that have the gene for prostate, men rather, because women obviously don't get prostate cancer, right? Men who have the gene for prostate cancer, there is a property in tomatoes that actually turns that off, right? So you should eat more tomatoes. So this is really interesting. So the other interesting thing about that is that elements in our environment as well can turn those genes on or off. And what I mean by that is that if you live in a really stressful environment, things that would not have otherwise occurred for you may occur. And so here in America, when we talk about stress in the environment, and we often talk about low-income neighborhoods where there may be a higher crime rate, low-income neighborhoods where there may not be adequate grocery stores for people to get healthy foods, and there's lots of corner stores and fast food restaurants and things like that, and people just simply don't have access, right? So I left a meeting this morning where we were talking about health in the community, and one of the things that I said, and I hope I wouldn't sound too negative, that we know that obesity is a complicated issue. Obesity is not just take a Zumba class and eat a bowl of vegetables and we're going to solve it. Let's just get everybody enrolled in a class, right? No, it's much, much more difficult than that, because if you are concerned about paying your rent, like who cares? You're not going to be focusing on whether or not the scale went down 3 pounds, right? So that's really important for us to recognize that people in low-income neighborhoods is not necessarily that, oh, they want to be unhealthy. Sometimes life circumstances really creates an environment that is not conducive to being the healthiest environment. It was really interesting because I found... I was listening to a radio interview once with a gentleman. I can't remember what part of New York he was the mayor of, and it was really fascinating because one of the things that he talked about, and they had him there, and he was the youngest mayor ever of this city, I believe, like in the state of New York, and they asked him what made him feel like he had the experience to be mayor, and he said that he had experienced life from both sides, and he remembered when he lived inside of a project housing and his mother was on welfare, and the closest store that they could go grocery shopping, they had to take 2 buses to, and they had to take the bus, and the bus that dropped them off like a half a mile from their house, and so they had to get off the bus and then they have to walk home with the groceries. And the interesting thing, so people may say, okay, that's not uncommon. We know we have this infrastructure problem within cities. But the interesting thing that he said that struck me in particular was, he said, so when we got home at night, we were tired. And sometimes it's not that you don't want to do things to pull yourself out of a situation. He says sometimes we were just too physically tired from the struggle of the day to even do anything else. And so that really struck me. Like, wow, I had not even thought about it in that way. So I think that it's really important that we recognize that this is an issue. that we recognize that it does take a community, and it takes help. It takes people working together to create a community that kind of alleviates those problems for people. The other thing that I think that is interesting in this conversation is really the effect of not just lifestyle, but I guess your environment is what I'm trying to get at. Because when we talk about lifestyle, I talk about a lot about personal choices. I talk about, okay, we should eat this. I talk about, well, you should move this way. And, the very obvious things like you should not be smoking, like smoking causes lung cancer, right? So that's not a big aha for people. Everybody knows that. I think that we talk about those things a lot, but what we don't talk about is a lot of things that are not in people's control, like where you're born, who you're born to, the skin that you're born in, those things that you are born with a mountain to climb. And I think that that's something that we also have to recognize. We have to recognize that sometimes. Okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. And so I had this, and because I want to tell you what's in my mind, that where I'm trying to go with this. So I had an interesting situation personally with my organization, and we applied for a grant, and one of the reviewers of the grant said, and so we applied for a grant to help people in low-income neighborhoods, and one of the reviewers for the grant comment said something like, oh, they like being overweight. They don't care anything about losing weight. They're happy. They think they look good overweight. All they care about is going to the store and eating a bunch of sugar and buying stuff in bulk. And I have to tell you, it completely threw me aback, because I guess I couldn't believe that people had that view of people in low-income neighborhoods. It was just something that was just like, it struck me like, oh, wow, people think that? Like, you think that someone is unhealthy and they enjoy being unhealthy? Like, really? You don't think they deserve help? And so that really threw me aback. And I think that we don't take into account people's environment, their environment of not just where they choose to be, because you can say, oh, well, they get in trouble because they choose to hang out with those friends, or they don't do what they're supposed to do because they choose to engage in that behavior. But sometimes you're born into a situation where you don't choose the outcome of it. So lots of things and so I'll give you some examples. If you have a kid who is, 10, 13, hey, adults, you don't choose the fact that you're born and you're African American, or you're Hispanic, or you're any other nationality that has challenges living in America. You don't choose your parents, and that your parents were impoverished before you were born. You don't choose it. You don't contribute to it. You're just born into that situation. And as a parent, I know, watching my mom grow up, you just do the best that you can. And sometimes it really is just trying to survive day to day. When you don't have a job, or your job does not pay you a livable wage, every day is about trying to make ends meet. And you can't think beyond that, because we know that, first of all, the first thing that we are going to focus on is we want to survive. Like food, clothing, and shelter. That's your first priority. It is the human need first priority. And so even your health will take a back seat to that, especially if you have kids. You want to know if you can get overtime so that you can bring in more money so your kids can have a roof over their heads. It's not about whether or not, I lost 10 pounds today or this week. That's really not your focus. And so you have to be given resources in order to alleviate some of that stress, because stress is one of the biggest killers. I say it is the biggest killer. I think that stress is the number one killer. I often tell people that my mom died from the effects of diabetes, but I know now through my knowledge of about how your environment affects you, that what killed my mother was stress. Diabetes was just the vehicle that it took. Stress, just worrying about it from day to day. You know, I tell a lot of my personal business, so y'all gotta excuse me. I saw my sister over the weekend, and one of the things that we talked about was when my mom had a stroke about 18 months before she died. And when she had a stroke and we had to take over her finances and make sure her rent was paid and, you know, all of that. And she looked at her books and she's like, oh my God, how did she do this? How did she make sure everything were paid? We grew up impoverished, but we never felt impoverished. My mother never made us feel as if it was like we were poor, or I can't ever remember wanting for something that I didn't have, or not eating on a night. I mean, even if we had to go to, I do remember as a child a couple of times going to a food shelter to get something to eat. I mean, but I don't remember ever feeling like it was, you know, that we were like poor. You know, we were on welfare, but we weren't like poor. And that sounds like really weird, but as a kid, you think of poor as being, I can't afford shoes, right? We see the kids on TV that's in like this third world country. We think of that as poor, but we don't think of ourselves as poor. As an adult now, I know that we were really poor. But that's a really interesting realization. Actually, I'm just thinking about that. But so here's some of the interesting things is that, you know, the stress that you go through just knowing that you're poor, just knowing that you are barely surviving, I think that that in itself is impactful on your health. So there's a study that shows that what they did was they took caretakers of Alzheimer's patients. And so here's the other interesting thing: if those of you who have people who they're caring for that may have a disability or may have have an illness, is when they do studies on stress, caretakers are like the number one group that they try to study, because even though you may be doing well with taking care of your loved one, we know that caretakers are under enormous amounts of stress. So they did this particular study, and one group was caretakers of Alzheimer's patients, or Alzheimer's loved ones, parents, etc. And the other group were on an age and financial equivalent, but they were not caretakers. And they made small wounds on their arms. So they took a device that's about the size of a pencil eraser, and they put wounds on them, and then they watched them heal, right? Let them heal on their own. They found that, and we know that the healing process is a process of your immune system, right? Your immune system activates all of its soldiers and its healing and its antibiotic natural ability, and it heals the wounds that we have. But they found that the caretakers' wounds, on average, took 9 extra days to heal. That is very, very interesting. It was a very interesting study for the fact that it just gave us definitive proof of the effect of stress. We know that stress under an extended period of time has a significant impact on your physiology. It has a significant impact on the way your brain functions, on the way that you on your health, especially if you are already diagnosed with an illness like diabetes or high blood pressure. Stress can exacerbate that illness significantly. And so managing stress is extremely, extremely important. Heba, that is funny. You are not going to die, inshallah. No, so the point is, so I don't want to be like Debbie Downer. The point is not that these things are insurmountable. It is that we have to recognize they exist. One of the things that I particularly, I'm African American, and one of the things that African American women do, and I think women just do this in general, it's not something that's exclusive to Black women. We are the shoulders that hold up the family. We are the ones that everything falls on. We solve the problems. We make sure the house is together. If we need to work, we're working and keeping the house together. Women have a lot of responsibility. And I think that we have this idea of, for African Americans, we have this I'm a strong Black woman thing, right? And I don't know if there's a saying for any other nationality, but but I think that it's important that we recognize that saying that is not changing the physiology of what is happening to your body. It's not. I mean, it absolutely not. Recently there was a study that came out, right, that said African American women, they don't age as rapidly. Our skin ages 10 years. We look 10 years younger than what we are. But internally, we are aging faster than just about everybody because we're not taking care of our health. So that's kind of like a real eye-opener. So despite the fact of you holding up a front, of being like super strong, inside your body is reacting to the stress. And we are not meant to constantly react. We know people who are under extended amount of stress, they get sick more. When we talked about the study, this shows the compromised immune system. We know that they are more prone to things like depression. We know that they are more prone to illnesses from all across the board. So we need to make sure that stress is something that we are managing. He was said, in the Arab world, we say, I'm the man. I think that we have something similar in the United States. With single moms, they get credit for being the mom and the dad. So we have something very similar. That's actually kind of funny. So that's really interesting. So here's another thing. So I don't want to be just a Debbie Downer. So let's talk about a little bit about what we can do, right? So I am definitely a solutions-oriented person. And I think that some of those things that we can do in order for us to overcome this. So when we talk about, so I want to specifically say what we're trying to overcome. So let's overcome this health disparity. When I say a health disparity, that means there's a difference between nationalities, right? Same age, same gender, but white women get less diabetes than Black women, less than Hispanic women. African American women are more overweight than white women. Hispanic women are more overweight than African American women. That is what we call health disparity, that there is a difference for people who are the same age and the same nationality. Well, we can compare health disparities of lots of things. Rich and poor is one of the biggest things. Here in New Haven, we have two neighborhoods who are literally next to each other, which is the richest neighborhood in New Haven is literally across the street from the poorest neighborhood in the city. And that's a huge problem. It's a huge concern because, again, just like in, New Orleans or in Chicago, all of this exists. It exists in just about every state in the United States, and I'm sure it exists in other places in the world. So here's one of the interesting, the realizations that I personally had a few weeks ago. So I had the opportunity to participate in something that's called the Privilege Walk. I think that's what it's called. And you might have seen it. There's been quite a few videos online about it. So they line everybody up, and every time they give an attribute or something about a person, if that fits you, then you take a step forward. So it says things like, if you grew up in a two-family household, then you can take a step forward. If your parents owned their home, you can take a step forward. If you know someone who was a victim of gun violence, take a step back. If your family took vacations when you were a kid, take a step forward. If your parents read to you, take a step forward. If your parents had more than 50 books in their house, take a step forward. If you so you can see, like, they give a whole list of things that are out of your control, right? So you did not control that when you were born your parents owned their home or not, right? There was previous circumstances for your parents that allowed them to do that. And one of the interesting things that I found when I did that is that even though I did not have the privilege of the financial things that other people in the line had, everything that was under my mom's control that she could control, she contributed, right? So where I got to take a step forward, which was actually, it had me really thinking about my mom and being appreciative of her, was things like, did your mom read to you? Yes, she read to us. And did you have more than 50 books in your house? Oh, my mom had walls and walls of books, and I've picked up that habit. It was another one. They asked us something like, did your parents tell you can be anything that you wanted? And they asked things like, did you feel self-confident? Things like that I understand that she could actually contribute to, that there was no financial cost to it. Everything that she could, she did. And even being born in an environment that I had no control of, everything that could possibly give me an advantage gave me an advantage. So, alhamdulillah, I'm grateful. May Allah have mercy on her. So I think that it's really, and so that's really important. So now let's go to solution steps, right? I said I was going to be on here for 30 minutes, but y'all know I don't never keep to my time. I'm just talking, because I just talk, because I like to talk, right? Oh no, I am married. So alhamdulillah, I have a very nice husband. Thank you. I don't need to arrange a husband. I see. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. So so let's talk about solutions. So some of the things that are action steps, because we know that, you can't solve everything. One person or one organization can't make sure people are paid a livable wage and clean up all of the parks and make sure everybody has a grocery store in their neighborhood. And, you can't do everything. But what are some of the things that people can do for themselves that can make the best of the situation that they are in? So one of those things that we like to talk about is we like to talk about empowering people with knowledge and resources. So what does that mean? And yes, I do have a story for everything that I talk about. So let me tell you my story about this one, right? So, and you may have heard this story already, that one of the reasons why I started my nonprofit organization was because of a phone call that I had with my mom, who she had had diabetes for 28 years, and she called me one day and asked me if she should go to the nutritionist that the doctor referred her to. And I said to her, you've had diabetes for 28 years and nobody ever referred you to a nutritionist? And she's like, no. So it was really an eye-opener for me, because it made me realize that all of those years where she would eat things that we know she wasn't supposed to eat with diabetes, or she would drink soda and things like that, that we would tell her that, you're not supposed to do that. You're being hard-headed on purpose. She really did not know. And it made me realize that one of the things that can make a difference is really empowering people with information. So one of the things that I did at my fitness studio is, everybody knows that when you first come to me, the first thing that we're doing is orientation. And we're going to talk about nutrition. And I'm going to tell you what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. If you follow it, that's up to you. But you're going to have the information. So empowering people with information, and truthful information. Truthful information, not selling you a quick fix wrap or pill or anything like that, but how you change the actual habits and lifestyle, so that you can have better health and a better outcome. So empowering people with information. The second thing that we can do is, in that empowerment, teaching people how they can make better lifestyle choices. One of those things really is reducing stress. So how do we actually have something happen in our lives and manage it in a way where we are not giving ourselves undue amounts of stress in order for us not to exacerbate our health problems. So mindful meditation is something that's really important. As Muslims, we make salah and we make dua, but mindfulness can actually help improve that as well. So even if you're not Muslim and your first thing is to go to pray, right? There's another saying that says you have to worry or you have to pray. You can't do both of them, right? But many people do both of them. Their whole prayer is a worry. Oh God, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Oh, So even though there is this idea that praying alleviates worry, it doesn't always alleviate worry. But we can. Our brain is like a television. You can change the channel. You can switch on, you can switch off, you can put your focus where you need to put your focus at the appropriate time. It takes practice, yes, and it takes effort, and it is a process of learning how to do that. But it is certainly something that can be done. So teaching people how to manage stress in that way is extremely important. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she is executive director of a mental health nonprofit. And one of the interesting things that she said to me was that in their recent research, that they're finding that 50% of the children that is in their program are clinically depressed. Like, they deal exclusively with low-income children. These are not children that are on medication. These are general population children that had not been diagnosed previously. And some of the things that leads to depression is food insecurity, not knowing if you're going to have something to eat at night, having a family member that's incarcerated. Those kind of things are really stressful. Oftentimes when people go to prison, we don't recognize that their family members are actually in a sort of prison themselves, that they are feeling the stress and the worry of having someone who is incarcerated. So all of those, so knowing how to deal with those emotions when they come up is extremely, extremely important. I am going to see if anybody has any questions right now, any questions or any comment. I am ignoring all of the silly comments from all of you people, but I would not mind a comment or a question about health disparities. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is we want to make sure that we recognize. And so here is the last thought that I'm going to leave you with, and what you can do, what you watching can do, right? So there is a study, again, you can look it up. It's called Blue Zones. And in the Blue Zone study, what the researcher did is that he went and found communities where the average age was 100 or more, right? That was the average age that people lived to. And there are several communities. One is in Italy, one is in Japan. There's actually one in the United States. And so they looked at the things about their lifestyle. They looked at how much physical activity they did. They looked at their diets. They looked at their sense of community. And many of the things varied, like how much fat each community was different. You know, people in France ate lots of fat. People in Japan did not, but they both lived to over 100. So that was not a part of it. They looked at how much physical activity they did, varied greatly. The one thing that was common in all of these communities was the fact that they had a close-knit community and friends. There was one community in Japan, and they even had a special name for it, and I can't remember the name for it, but they became friends in grade school, and they were literally friends for over 100 years, the same 3 women. The same thing in the community in the United States. They had it was a Seventh-day Adventist community, actually, and they had a strong sense of community. So I think that particularly in the internet age, we think that if you say salams to somebody or say hi on Facebook, then, oh yeah, I saw her kid graduated. You think that you are connected. But human beings are meant to have one-on-one personal connection. So make sure that you actually go and have coffee with that sister that you're always commenting on her page, or her, congratulating her for her kid's activity. Have some interaction. So that is what I'm going to task you with. Find one person that you haven't seen that often, except for on the internet, and you go and have coffee with her or call her on the phone. Actually hear a voice, not Facebook Live, but on the phone, right? So Heba wants to know, how is stress related to sleeping disorders? Stress is directly related to sleeping disorders. So I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to diagnose. I don't want to diagnose your sleeping disorder, but I would certainly say stress has been shown to have a significant impact in sleeping disorders. So I would certainly talk about that. If you go to your doctor and you talk about not being able to sleep and they don't ask, certainly mention the amount of stress that you're under. It says, one of the brothers says, drink honey and milk and you'll have a sound sleep. For some people, that don't always work, but it is worth a try. Some of the things that you can do. And sleep is absolutely important. Sleep is absolutely essential. So one of the things that we know about sleep is during the day, our neurons are very active and they're doing all of the things that we have to do to move and function throughout our day. And they also produce a type of, they produce a toxin in our body. And what we think sleep does is that sleep allows those active neurons to rest, and it allows your body to clear out those toxins, right? So when you have a chronic sleep disorder, which means every night you're not sleeping, then your body is not able to efficiently clear out all of those toxins. And so you have things like problems remembering things. That's another thing that happens when we're asleep. When we're asleep, our body actually takes all of those things from our short-term memory and it stores it into long-term memory. And so when you're not sleeping, that process is not happening, and then you will have a problem. You'll have a problem remembering things. That's one of the side effects. You'll have a problem with attention, and that's another side effect of that. You'll have a problem with managing your weight, because one of the things that happens when we don't get a lot of sleep is our hormones become imbalanced, particularly the hormone leptin. And so what leptin does is that it regulates your satiety, how hungry you are, right? So if you're not getting enough sleep, the hormones become imbalanced, and then you eat more because the hormone that tells you not to eat, that you're full, is not being produced at the level that it needs to. And the hormone that tells you that you're hungry is actually produced more of it. So we know this. We also know that just one night of not getting enough sleep actually raises your insulin level. That again, if you're doing that on a chronic basis, you're exposing yourself to a greater propensity of having diabetes. So getting sleep is really important. I certainly recommend that you talk to your doctor about that. Can you remove toxins from getting cupping done every month? Allahu alam. I am going to certainly stay in my lane. I am not an expert on hijma, and I am not very well versed on that. So I'm not going to be able to let you know about that. All right. I am going to get ready to go and log off, but I wanted to ask you guys a favor for me, right? So my nonprofit is Fit Haven, and you can find us on Facebook. You can also go to our website, fithaven.org, and we are in the middle of a 36-hour give-a-thon, and I never do things like GoFundMes or stuff like that, but this is kind of a big deal in our community, so we participate because it helps us do the work that we do in helping low-income neighborhoods improve the health disparity among women and girls. And so I'm going to put a link in this video, and we are in a competition for getting donations, and the minimum donation is $25. So if you have $25, we would certainly appreciate it. If you don't, I want you to click on the other link and vote for us to win $1,000. Well, if you have it, you could do both of them, right? So there's a couple of prizes that we're up for. So the nonprofit that gets the most individual donors can win $15,000. So that is why I am making the effort to break my trend of not doing GoFundMes, because not only do we get the money that you donate, but we can be in the running to actually get even more money. So we have a couple of prizes that we're going for. If we get more individual donors than any other nonprofit, and it can be as little as $25, then we can win $15,000, and that would help us a lot. But also too, if we get the most donors of any health nonprofit, we can get at least $1,000. We can also be nominated for $1,000. So the community foundation that hosts and organizes this give-a-thon, it's only 36 hours. So if you are watching this video before Wednesday, the 4th of May at 8 p.m., you can still help us. Again, we would love the $15,000 by getting a donation from you. But if you don't have it and you don't have the ability to give it, then at least vote for us so that we can win the extra $1,000, and that is for Fit Haven. So I hope I have been able to give you some beneficial information, and please continue to make dua for us and for the success of the organization so that we can help people and we can create a healthier world, one person at a time, all right? So I will talk to you soon, probably on Sunday. So keep on the group, all right? Assalamu alaikum.